Inside San Quentin, the shocking investigation that exposed a hidden prison secret. Sirens cut through the early morning fog drifting across the San Francisco Bay. Patrol cars screamed towards San Quentin State Prison, their lights slicing through the gray haze as officers rushed to respond to a call that had already shaken the institution to its core. At 5:42 a.m., an inmate had been found collapsed in the narrow hallway outside the vocational training wing, a place normally known for coding classes and the celebrated Journalism Guild. But this morning, all that hope and reform was overshadowed by the reality that something had gone horribly wrong. The inmate's name was Leroy Maddox, age 43. Serving a long sentence for armed robbery, Maddox wasn't known as violent. He kept to himself, wrote letters to his daughters every week, and rarely stirred trouble. But now he lay lifeless on the polished concrete floor, his body positioned in a way that immediately raised suspicion. There were no visible wounds, no weapons, no signs of a struggle. Yet the expression on his face, frozen in a wide-eyed stare, made even the most seasoned officers feel uneasy. Lieutenant Rafael Vega, a veteran of 22 years inside San Quentin, arrived first on scene. He crouched beside the body, running his flashlight between the man's hands, along his face, and across the hallway walls. No blood. No bruises. No forced entry. Where are the cameras? Vega muttered. That question, more than the body itself, set off the alarm bells. This particular hallway was supposed to have surveillance. San Quentin recorded nearly every inch of movement inside its walls. But the feed from this corridor had gone dark exactly 8 minutes before Maddox was found. A coincidence? Or something deliberate? Warden Elias Dunford arrived moments later, his expression stern, jaw clenched. San Quentin had been through scandals before: overcrowding, contraband rings, investigations that went all the way up to Sacramento, but this was the kind of incident that could spiral into a statewide storm. "Lock down the wing," Dunford ordered. "Nobody moves until I get answers." Within minutes, investigators pushed through the cell blocks, questioning anyone who might have seen or heard something. But prisoners shook their heads. Guards claimed they hadn't been assigned to that hall at the time. And the only staff member scheduled near the area, a maintenance worker, wasn't on duty. He had called out sick the night before. The pieces weren't fitting together. To make things worse, Maddox wasn't just any inmate. He had recently joined the Journalism Guild, helping produce articles for the San Quentin News. The paper, known nationally for its raw honesty, often reported on prison conditions, staffing issues, and internal audits. And just 2 days before his death, Maddox had told the Guild's editor that he was working on something big. Something that could shake this place to its foundation. Now he was dead, with no apparent cause, and the cameras had conveniently malfunctioned. Detective Alyssa Crane from the Marin County Sheriff's Office was assigned to lead the investigation. She stepped into San Quentin with a reputation for being relentless, especially when something smelled wrong. "Lieutenant Vega," she began, "you're telling me the camera feed shut off minutes before this man died, and nobody knows why?" "That's correct," Vega replied. "We checked the security logs. No technical errors. Someone manually disabled them." Crane frowned. So someone inside this prison knew exactly where to blind the system. As she examined the hallway, her attention caught on a thin, almost invisible scratch on the concrete floor beside the wall, a narrow drag mark, about 2 feet long. "Was his body moved?" she asked. Vega exhaled slowly. "That's what we're trying to figure out." But the deeper they looked, the stranger things became. Maddox's final cell inspection from the night before showed nothing out of the ordinary. No notes. No contraband. No signs of distress. Yet when Crane opened his property box, she found a single sheet of paper tucked inside a book about California prison reform. The page was blank, except for 4 words, penciled in light handwriting. "They're watching everything." Crane stared at the message, her pulse tightening. Who was they? What had Maddox discovered? And how far were they willing to go to keep it buried? Before she could speak, a guard sprinted down the hall toward her, breathless. "Detective, you need to see this. We opened the door to the maintenance basement." He swallowed hard. And what we found down there changes everything. Detective Alyssa Crane followed the guard down a steep flight of metal stairs, her boots clanging against the rusted steps. The deeper they descended into the maintenance basement, the colder the air grew. Pipes snaked overhead, dripping condensation, and the hum of old machinery echoed through the shadows. It was a place few inmates ever saw, and even fewer staff members bothered to inspect unless something was broken. But something was broken. Something far more important than a pipe or a boiler. At the bottom of the stairs, Vega waited beside a floodlight that cast harsh beams across the concrete floor. In the center of the room lay a row of boxes, stacked neatly as if someone had arranged them in a hurry but still wanted them to look undisturbed. Crane stepped closer, her eyes narrowing. These were hidden behind a false wall panel, Vega explained. Maintenance found the panel loose during a routine inspection. That's why we checked. Crane pulled on a pair of gloves and lifted the lid of the topmost box. Inside were surveillance tapes, dozens, maybe hundreds, each labeled by date. The earliest one was from 6 months ago. The most recent? 2 days before Maddox was found dead. These aren't digital backups, Crane muttered. San Quentin switched entirely to digital surveillance years ago. Why would someone keep physical tapes? Vega hesitated before answering. Unless someone didn't want the digital system involved. Crane felt a chill crawl up her spine. These tapes could be anything. Copies of deleted footage, records someone wanted hidden, or evidence of crimes committed inside the prison walls that never made it into official reports. And if Maddox had discovered them, or seen something he wasn't supposed to, it might explain everything. She opened a second box. Inside were folders of printed documents, confidential memorandums, internal affairs reports, grievances filed by inmates, and handwritten notes from officers. Many of them referenced misconduct, excessive force, unauthorized surveillance, contraband trafficking, and suspicious transfers of inmates between units. If this stash belonged to a staff member, it would already be enough to destroy careers. But if it belonged to someone outside the chain of command, someone running their own operation in the shadows, the implications were far worse. What did we just walk into? Crane asked under her breath. Before Vega could answer, Crane noticed something else. A small black recorder sat between the boxes, its red light blinking. She snatched it up. The device was still running. She pressed play. A distorted voice crackled out, male, low, and tense. They can't find this. If they do, everything falls apart. Maddox thinks he knows something, but he doesn't understand who's really in control. Keep the cameras down in Hall D, and make sure the transfer files disappear. Crane froze. Her heart pounded. Replay that, Vega whispered. She did. The voice continued. No mistakes. If anyone talks, deal with it quietly. We've held this place together for years, and I won't let some reporter in training ruin what we built. The recording stopped abruptly. Crane lifted her head. This isn't just covering up one death. Someone's been manipulating this prison from the inside. Vega rubbed a hand over his face. Crane, whoever that voice belongs to, they're not low-ranking. Only a handful of people have the authority to touch camera feeds, transfer logs, or internal files. And Maddox? Crane asked. He stumbled onto this? Looks that way. The two exchanged a look. Maddox's involvement with the Journalism Guild suddenly seemed less like coincidence and more like a direct threat to whoever controlled this secret archive. Crane walked toward another table, where a stack of printed emails caught her attention. One was marked with bold red letters. Unauthorized correspondence. Investigate immediately. She scanned the lines. The email was from Maddox, addressed to an outside journalist he'd spoken with during a recent San Quentin news workshop. He had written, I found something in the records. Transfers that don't make sense. Missing hours in the logs. If anything happens to me or if I suddenly get moved, check the basement storage. It's bigger than contraband. Someone's pulling the strings. Vega exhaled sharply. He warned us. But then Crane noticed the timestamp. The email was never sent. Someone had intercepted it. Before they could process the implications, a sudden clatter echoed through the basement, the sharp sound of metal hitting concrete. Crane spun around. At the far end of the basement, a shadow darted behind a column. Someone had been watching them. Listening. Vega reached for his radio. "This is Vega in sublevel maintenance. We need." A loud bang cut him off, a door slamming shut. They were trapped. Crane ran toward the exit, but the steel door locked from the outside. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. "Detective," Vega said, his voice tight. "Someone just sealed us in." Crane looked back at the stacks of tapes, at the evidence they had uncovered. This wasn't just a cover-up. This was an operation big enough, and dangerous enough, that its architects were willing to lock down investigators inside a basement to protect it. And now someone on the outside knew they had found everything. Detective Alyssa Crane pressed her shoulder against the steel basement door, testing it again, but it didn't budge. Vega was already scanning the dim room with his flashlight, searching for another exit. There wasn't one. The basement had only a single entrance, and whoever sealed it from the outside knew that. "They planned this," Vega said, breathing hard. "They knew we'd find the tapes." Crane steadied her thoughts. The shadow they'd seen wasn't random. Someone inside San Quentin's staff had been keeping watch, and the second they realized the investigation was getting too close, they reacted with precision. "Check the walls," Crane ordered, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "Look for vents, access panels, anything." They searched fast. The air felt heavier now, like the basement had shifted from a crime scene to a trap. Crane's light cut across the boxes again. The tapes, the intercepted emails, the hidden reports. This wasn't just evidence. This was leverage. Whoever controlled this archive controlled San Quentin itself. Suddenly, Vega stopped. "Detective, over here." Behind a row of old tool cabinets, half buried under dust, was another panel, metal, dented, and locked with a rusted latch. Crane knelt down and yanked it open. Behind it was a narrow utility shaft, barely wide enough to crawl through, stretching upward into darkness. "It must connect to the laundry block," Vega said. "Maintenance uses these for pipe access." Crane didn't hesitate. "Then that's our way out." They climbed inside, the space tightening around them. Dust filled their lungs. Metal scraped their uniforms. The shaft twisted upward, the incline steep. After several minutes of crawling, Crane saw faint light through the slits of a floor grate. She pushed the grate with her shoulder. It gave way, clattering softly onto tiles. They emerged inside the laundry block, empty, silent, the machine still. Crane pulled Vega out of the shaft and sealed the grate behind them. "We need to move," Crane said. "We don't know who locked that door, but they'll realize we got out." They slipped down the corridor, staying close to the walls, heading toward the administration wing. Crane's mind raced. Who would go this far? Who had the power to manipulate transfers, shut down cameras, intercept emails, and hold secret archives? Only someone high-ranking. Someone trusted. As they rounded the corner near the infirmary, voices drifted through the hallway. Crane froze, pulling Vega back behind a column. The voices were familiar. Warden Elias Dunford and Captain Maurice Hall. He found the recorder, Dunford said, his voice low and furious. And the detective was with him. "If they get those boxes out of this prison, every investigation from the last 5 years will open back up." "We can control the fallout," Hall replied. "We just have to handle Crane before she takes something to the sheriff's office." Crane's heart pounded. The warden, the captain, the men running the prison were the ones running the operation. And Maddox? He had stumbled into their shadow system, the hidden tapes, the suppressed complaints, the unauthorized transfers that moved inmates who knew too much into solitary or out of the facility entirely. When he tried to warn someone, they silenced him. "We deal with Crane tonight," Dunford said. "A transfer order already has her name on it." Hall chuckled darkly. "San Quentin investigates her disappearance. We handle the paperwork. End of story." Crane stepped back, her breath shaking. Vega whispered, "Detective, we need to expose them now." Crane nodded. "We get the evidence to someone outside this prison. Someone they can't manipulate." But as they turned to retreat, a flashlight beam snapped across the hall, straight at them. "Detective Crane." a guard shouted. Hands where I can see them. More beams flicked on. Officers rushed toward them. Run, Crane whispered. They sprinted through the corridor as shouts erupted behind them. Crane cut left, racing toward the Journalism Guild room, the only place she knew had an unsecured computer and outside communication lines approved for the San Quentin news. If they could transmit even part of the files. They slammed into the room and locked the door behind them. Crane dumped the recorder, reports, and 2 tapes onto the desk. Plug it in, Vega urged. Crane connected the recorder to the terminal. The screen loaded, slow, agonizingly slow. Officers pounded on the door. Voices shouted commands. The transfer bar hit 22%, then 41%, then 68%. Crane. Dunford's voice thundered from the other side. Open this door. 88%, 93%, 98%. A final bang nearly splintered the door. 100%. The files sent. Crane grabbed the recorder and Vega followed her out the back window just as officers burst through the door. They dropped to the ground outside and sprinted into the courtyard as alarms wailed across the prison. Minutes later, Marin County deputies swarmed the facility. The transmitted files had reached them, and they came fast. Dunford and Hall were taken into custody before sunrise. The tapes, the reports, the recorder, everything Maddox died for, became the catalyst of a massive statewide investigation. Weeks later, Crane stood outside San Quentin as news trucks gathered. The journalist Maddox had tried to contact stepped beside her. You exposed a whole network, he said quietly. If he could see this, he'd know he wasn't alone. Crane looked up at the prison walls, towering, cold, and silent. No, she said. But he paid the price for trying. And now everyone knows the truth. Sirens echoed faintly from inside. And somewhere deep in the administrative records, one unanswered email from Maddox, the one he never got to send, finally found its way into the official investigation. If anything happens to me, look in the basement.